Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the R Squared podcast. My name is Rajat.
And it's your boy Rishman here. What's up, everyone?
Today, we have a very interesting episode. It's an episode that we actually didn't plan on doing until a few days ago, but based on the events that have unfolded over the past couple of days of a particular election, we thought it would be timely to have this episode on our podcast. And to join me and Rishi today is our resident White House correspondent, all the way from East Finchley in London, Mr. Vishal Chalishazar. Vishal, how are you doing?
So, firstly, I just want to say to both Rishman and Rajat that it is such an honor to be on your podcast, and it has been my dream to be on your podcast. Quite frankly, since I heard about it last week, and yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Vishal, is this your podcast voice?
This is absolutely my podcast voice, and
Okay,
also my real life voice if you live with me.
right,
So
right.
yes,
Okay. I'll be interested to see how this voice progresses as we go along on the podcast.
absolutely, absolutely, I'm interested too.
All right, great, great. So before we get into the results of this election, let's take a step back. I want to know what your guys' thoughts were in the build up to this election result. What were your thoughts on how it progressed? When it was Trump versus Biden, and then the events that happened after, and then Trump versus Harris. What were your guys' expectations and thoughts on how it was progressing? Rishi, why don't you go first? Or Vishal, why don't you go first?
Let's hear your beautiful voice.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So, I think if we start towards the beginning of the year, there was, I would say, a big anticipation for what Trump 2.0 would look like, and I think he'd already started doing his campaigning much earlier than of course the Democrats. Um, and I think I would say he was already quite popular and overwhelmingly like favored going into him versus Biden. And then, of course, as I kind of go through the rest of the year, a couple of events happened. Biden had a lot of gaffes. His popularity was generally already going down, but I felt like there was a few things that happened. I think speeches that he gave where people automatically really felt like maybe this guy isn't fit to run for president. Then I think that real infighting began within their own party, Democratic Party, and I think all of that was really helping Trump. Um, and then, of course, unfortunately, the two assassination attempts happened. I think again that really helped Trump's popularity. And then, of course, Kamala came into the race. It became a bit more even. And to be honest, I didn't think that it would be such a kind of one-sided victory. I thought it was going to be a lot closer in terms of the final results. So that was quite interesting for me because I thought up until the end it was pretty even. At least that's what I was reading in the media. So that's my view on the whole year.
Yeah, Rishi, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, I don't agree with Vishal about the fact that he thinks it was going to be a close, tight contest. Trump was always going to win. I'm not saying I support the guy, but let me tell you, he is competing against Biden's team. Well, Kamala Harris, which is still Biden's team. And over the past 4 years of them being in power, they did nothing but raise the cost of living, worsen the standard of living, jobs fell. Their presidency and rulership in the world was a nightmare for everyone. Being in Kenya, trust me, it also affected us here. The shipping rates went up. They're pathetic. They're more than enough nice words I can say to describe them, which I'll keep to myself. But Trump, look, anyone would have won against Kamala Harris and Biden. Like, you cannot give me an excuse to say that, oh, because Kamala Harris is the vice president, that she couldn't do much. She's the vice president, the second highest, one of the most powerful people in the world. She has a lot of power. She could do a lot. She can do a lot, especially when you have a useless president as Biden, who is a zombie, can't do anything, can't count numbers, doesn't know what's left and right. You know, it's. But let's get into it. You let us discuss on these topics.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I want to take a bit of a step back. So obviously, we can all agree that in the Trump versus Biden that race, I think it was clearly, I mean, it was pretty clear that Trump was the favorite there. I think I go back to I think the debate that they had where Biden just messed up so many times, and I think Trump. I mean, you have to give credit where it's due. He has some great one-liners at times. I think there was on one of the times that Biden messed up, he was like, I don't know what Biden just said, and I don't think he knows what he said either. And I think that
and I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more border patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look,
I think that basically summed up the sentiment at that time. And to be honest, after that, I would also agree with Vishal. I felt that obviously I think the assassination attempts went obviously in favor of Trump's popularity. But I did think when Harris came into the fact, especially after the debate that they had, Trump and Harris, I thought it would be quite close just because, to be honest, Harris absolutely killed that debate. As in, she was a clear winner of that. I think she was a public prosecutor before getting into politics, and I think her debating skills really showed up in that aspect. But yes, now let's get into it. Trump has won the race to the White House, and I think let's focus on the economic. Obviously, there are a lot of issues surrounding this election, but let's focus on the economic aspect because I think that was the number one voted issue for all American voters, as per a poll which I saw on, I think, a pretty reputed news site. And so let's focus on that. Vishal, Rishi, what are your thoughts on Trump's? Vishal, why don't you go first? Economics on the economic policies.
Sure, sure. So basically, I think the number one thing in terms of economic policies is it sounds like he really wants to continue what he was doing in his first term. So there's going to be a lot of tariffs. He really sees a lot of the trade in the world at the moment as being unfair against America. So I feel like most of his economic policies will be based on trying to correct that or realign that, as he thinks. So I feel like there's probably going to be a lot more, I think, maybe renegotiated trade deals with the rest of the world, particularly with China, EU. And I think as an extension of that, you'll see what he said in his first term quite extensively. He wants countries in NATO to kind of pay their fair share. So I think it's a broader theme. Yes, it starts with economics, but you'll see that kind of trickling down to lots of other things. He just wants every country to pay for their own things, really.
Yes, I mean, well, since you brought that up, I would also agree because, I mean, going back to Rishi's point earlier about the cost of living rising during the Biden presidency, I I would feel that that was an issue that happened across the world, just purely due to COVID, just because there were so many supply constraints, and that automatically caused prices to rise, and that happened everywhere, even in the UK as well, where we are living. And uh, and all of Trump's policies, whether it's the tariffs or the cutting of the corporate tax rates, I think they're all inflationary policies, which, as per general economic and finance rules, would result in an increase in prices. So, I mean, I don't know what the plan of execution is in terms of what he's saying.
Just to add to that before Rishman jumps in, I feel like the angle he's going for is economic expansion. So absolutely, the prices will rise. You're right through all those different policies, but I think the idea is always that the rate of growth is quicker than the rate at which the prices are rising. And I think what really helped Trump is that in his 4 years of his first term, the economy was doing really well. So I think that was definitely the platform on which he ran this time, is that we gave you a really good 4 years and we can do that again. And I think it was kind of bad timing for Biden in the sense he kind of inherited an economy that was just kind of going through COVID and coming out of COVID. And I think something you mentioned earlier, not today, but previously, was that they printed a lot of money in order to kind of bail out ordinary people, ordinary businesses, and I think that had a huge impact on inflation. And you saw that across the world, to be honest. So I think that again didn't help Biden in his presidency. Rishman, over to you.
Yeah, honestly, Trump's group, interesting people definitely on his side. You got Elon Musk, you got Dana White. They even talked about Joe Rogan. All of those people I just mentioned, I personally respect them quite a bit. They have an interesting way of thinking, a proactive way, productive way of thinking. So we're bound to see some interesting things happen for the economy and generally in the world. It should be well. So again, let's see what happens. And one thing about Trump during his term, wars were a lot less. So I assume that he's going to really try and create peace worldwide, which does help generally with countries economics and production generally worldwide. I give you an example. By wars breaking out currently, shipping containers from China to Kenya have gone from 30 days to 60 days. So fees have gone up like crazy, time taken has gone up like crazy. So it is affecting all the third world countries a lot. And I do see some of his policies that he will hope well, so the good policies that he'll implement actually coming to fruition to the benefit of the lower income class globally. So again, he's not perfect. He has a lot of things wrong with him, but you can't just say one person is completely bad because of a few things. You got to take into account all aspects of what he's doing, be it wrong or right, and choose the good, of course. But yeah, that's my opinion, honestly.
Yeah, I think in that sense, I would agree that he definitely has a strong presence in terms of a leader, and definitely has a bit of an assertiveness, which I also guess you need, which I also feel Biden didn't have, and Harris didn't have as well. And I think another thing which I also noticed, and which obviously now that the result is out, a lot of news channels and news outlets have been doing a lot of post-mortem analysis on why a lot of people voted for Trump, because initially it was, as you said, Vishal, earlier, it was expected to be quite close, I think, and obviously now it's pretty. I mean, he won pretty convincingly, and a lot of it was just, I think, the way he carried himself and the way he presented him certain aspects. So one interesting thing which I read about was, if you remember, if you go back to the debate with him and Harris, and there was that comment that he made about immigrants eating pets.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
And so even though, okay, that was found to be incorrect, what they were saying there is that because he raised such an inflammatory point, all the news coverage focused on immigration as whole, as an issue, and then there was less focus on anything Kamala Harris was proposing. Maybe whatever her strong points were, because I think from a lot of voters, so after the economy, immigration was the second most popular issue that voters were concerned about, and those two were seen as Trump's strengths, and so Trump was able to really get the people on board and to really focus on what he was doing. And then obviously you have the polarization on whether you agree or you disagree. But I think in that sense, he was able to really be a face in a sense and really get his message across in a way that people just had to know about him in a way.
Definitely. And it sounds like, to kind of sum up what you said, he really resonated with the people. And I think that's kind of why he won all those swing states, and loads of other voters which people didn't expect him to win.
Yeah. So I mean, I think he won every swing state, right? If I'm
Yeah,
not wrong.
pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. So that mean that's quite. I mean, usually it's quite crazy to think that every. I think are there like eight maybe? I don't
Seven or
really,
eight? Yeah,
7 or 8. To the fact that he won all of them is quite well. I mean, impressive to say the least. Regardless of what your opinions are on him.
precisely. And just to jump in and add one more point, I think foreign policy is also another thing which maybe it wasn't seen as the top five issues, but it is a bit of an extension of the economy. Um, as Rishi pointed out, that these wars are actually quite expensive. So I think Trump's whole stance has been he wants to end the wars because he thinks that the US is spending way too much money in getting involved in these things. So um, I think that was again something that a lot of voters would have probably resonated with, that they didn't see the current administration being able to stop these wars quickly enough or in an effective way enough. So Trump hasn't exactly given his plans of how he's going to do that, but he's repeatedly said at each of his rallies that I'll end these wars as soon as I'm in office.
Yeah, to be honest, in my personal opinion, I'm a bit skeptical about uh, not just Trump, but just America's overall intention to end all wars. Just if I'm not wrong, I think they are the largest arms exporter in the world. So I feel it's a bit contradictory, as in we don't really know where their intentions lie, regardless of administration. I think
Yeah, that's true.
it's so I don't know on that stance where things will go. But again, another thing that I wanted to quickly touch upon is you mentioned at the beginning. I think tariffs was one of his big points. If I remember seeing in every rally, in every debate, like tariffs, tariffs, tariffs.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word.
And so I think his intention is to increase uh, increase the consumption of domestic goods, right, and reduce consumption of foreign goods. And so, how do you guys see that in terms of? I think they want to increase more manufacturing in the U.S. And so, how do you guys see that progressing?
Rishman?
Yeah, so actually, one topic I can touch on, which I was reading about just recently, is the AGOA agreement. So that stands for African Growth Opportunity Act, whereby there's a partnership between the US and African countries, which are part of this act, to export goods into the US. And I think it's being renewed, and that really boosts a lot of jobs into these countries, and because there's a lot of manufacturers from all over the world who are willing to set up shop industries here, so that they can export duty free, or they do get the benefits of this AGOA agreement pact. And now Donald Trump is saying that he wants to revisit the whole AGOA agreement, um, which is a major problem, where businesses and people and countries have been planning years for, and now suddenly he's just going turning around all this. It creates a lot of chaos. So it's again, Donald Trump is a person. He can literally wake up one morning and just you know do something
Yeah,
crazy. I think we've seen that.
yeah,
He
that's
has
true.
no filter whatsoever. The thing about politicians, well, Donald Trump, he tells us what he's going to do directly, no matter how absurd it is. Whereas a lot of other politicians will tell you what you want to hear, and they'll still go ahead and do the bad things. So we end up liking them because we're listening to them, right? Where Donald Trump will do what he says, no matter how crazy, no matter how absurd. Just but yeah, this. So we're in for a great economic change in the world. How it's gonna happen, where it's gonna lead us, I don't know. I can't foresee. We just gotta wait.
Yeah, definitely a really good point there from Rishi. And I think the general theme is, as you said, he wants to bring manufacturing back to America. I think that's probably, one of the central policies that he's been pushing for since his first term, if anything. I would say Biden probably built on that in specific to the tech industry. So I think he pumped a lot of money into kind of AI and chip manufacturing within the US. So I
Yeah, I
think
think,
Donald
sorry to
Trump.
interrupt. I think TSMC has, I think, two major factories. I think they had one before. I think they just built a new one earlier this year, right? Or building
Absolutely,
one. Yeah.
absolutely, you're right. And at the cost of $40 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Please don't quote me on that, but I read that somewhere. And you're right. So I think Trump will probably continue with, I'm speaking very specifically about the tech industry, but he'll probably want to see more of that. Something he's repeatedly talked about is the automotive industry and trying to bring back jobs to build more cars in America. So I think none of these things should be surprising because he already pushed for this in his first term. For me, I think what's interesting is how American policy seems to shift depending on who's in power. And this is probably quite rare where you have, if we see the 2016 term, that was the Republicans with Trump, then the 2020 onwards was Democrats, and again it's flipped back. So it just means that it's hard to rely on America if you're talking about kind of long-term policies, because it really depends on who's in power, and they keep shifting back and forth. And
I
you're
couldn't
definitely
agree with
seeing
you
that,
more.
and you definitely see that with climate action, for example, um, and how it just depends who's in the White House, and they keep changing their stance and they keep changing their policies. So I think if you're looking at smaller countries, I think Rishi talked about some of the more developing countries previously. Um, it becomes hard to rely on America as a long-term partner, because you're not too sure where their position is, because it seems like it's too easy for them to change it depending on who's in power.
Let me just add one more point to that as well. So we speak to a lot of industries in China, in India, in Vietnam. Sorry, not Vietnam, Thailand, and Philippines, and America was importing a lot from those countries at a point in time. So industries were being set up like crazy. And then, America changed the stance, went more for African-led development and infrastructure. Sorry, not infrastructure, but products. And again, that led to a massive chaos in Southeast Asia, whereby you have all these companies. They have way too much capacity to produce. They don't have that many orders. They're trying to sell the machinery. Exactly what Vishal said. It's so difficult to long term plan. It's just you shouldn't use it. You shouldn't use America's current state of like its economy to plan. You know, to export to them. I agree with
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think the small countries are the ones that are going to struggle, as you said, because I think if I'm not wrong, in Trump's first term, when he did impose tariffs, a lot of other countries imposed retaliatory tariffs as well, India and China. And for them, I think they're big countries, so they can still handle it. But I think the small countries is as you said, where that instability will struggle. And also the other aspect is by bringing manufacturing into the US, are companies going to be able to be competitive in terms of cost? Because for example, uh, I mean, I don't know what for TSMC, for example, I don't know what the cost differences are in terms of producing in the US compared to in Taiwan. But I know, for example, in Germany, VW recently closed down few factories, laid off thousands of workers just because they couldn't match the cost of Chinese manufacturers. And so they're finding that in Europe and the US, that just the cost of labor is so high that, as in, how are you going to be able to compete in terms of that? So that, I think, it will be the challenge for companies that do try and set up manufacturing there.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's probably one of the more, deeper fundamental questions that they need to answer within the US economy, within the EU as well, quite frankly, because as you said, the cost of labor, the cost of energy is just far higher than you would have in other countries like in China or in Southeast Asia. So it really depends on which industries they target. And I think that's why Joe Biden's administration made it very clear that they were going to target the tech industry, just as an example. So I think maybe if they're doing more high value manufacturing, maybe they've got an advantage there. But in terms of everyday commodities, I think it'll be quite hard to match, as you said, for example, Chinese manufacturers.
Let me add something to that. Okay, despite all the like pros and cons we mentioned, one thing that will be quite, I think, interesting to see, beneficial, yes or no, I do not know yet, is going to be because, as you mentioned earlier, America is going to now start looking at the IT, the tech race, you can say, more seriously. It is going to give us some very interesting inventions, I feel, because the last time we had a crazy race, the arms race, we had a lot of technologies, uh, and like the moon mission, a lot happened. So with this IT race, we're going to get a lot of inventions, a lot of releases of different things. It hopefully should help the general population of the world. But yeah, that's what I see happening.
Do you think the focus is at the moment on AI and quantum computing? Is that where the real arms race is, if you like?
I mean, you saw what the director of Nvidia said. He's like, how on earth can a person like Elon Musk build a supercomputer in 19 days? It takes 2 years to plan it, 1 year to manufacture it. He's like, this man did it in 19 days. It shows you what type of a person we have on board in the leadership of the world, a man like Elon Musk. So we are in for a surprise. That guy can surprise anyone at any given point in time. We've seen the whole, chaos with Twitter, now known as X. So we're in for quite a ride. Just yeah, let's go with it.
Rishi, will you bring the popcorn?
Bring the maze. You can make the popcorn.
I think another interesting aspect is, as you said, the just the globalization of it, because it's now a lot of countries are now independent, right? Now they're not as reliant on each other as they can. Like China is almost really independent. India is growing a lot recently. Russia is doing its own thing. America is there with its own thing. And so I think that competitiveness as well is also good for, as you said, the general population as a whole. There'll clearly be a lot of innovation and development, not just in the tech space, but I think overall, there's be a lot of
I've got a
development.
question for both of you. Actually, I'm curious your thoughts on this because the recent past 5 years, the process of other countries moving away from the dollar has really accelerated quite a bit. So America's influence in the world, I think, should decrease because of their authority on money, on their currency. So what's your view on that? Predictions more like even.
It's such a good question, to be honest. So this is my own personal view, and I could be completely wrong. I feel like we'll never fully move away from the dollar. I think it will probably always have some level of importance as long as it's pegged to the oil industry, and as long as you have the petrodollar as the main form of trading, the world's most useful commodity. I think you'll always need to use the dollar in some form or shape. But I think the BRIC summit, which took place in Russia, I think a couple of weeks back, that was quite interesting because, as you know, the BRICS countries put together, they have a significant they have a significant economic contribution to the world, and they were talking about having a payment system which was kind of linked to their own local currencies, which meant that they didn't need to kind of transact within US dollars. So I think you'll probably see a lot more of that in the future. You might see countries trading with each other in their own currencies. But I think, in my personal opinion, you still always need the dollar to an extent. Maybe its influence will reduce, as you said, Rishi, but I think you'll still need something because even if you remove the dollar, I still think something else will come and replace that. You need some kind of universal medium of exchange, and I think at the moment that's the US dollar. So even if we move away from that, I still think something else will come and replace that. That's my
Right,
view.
right. That's
Yeah,
uh, that's
I
very interesting to hear,
would
Roger.
agree. Yeah, no, I would agree as well. I think it for that complete shift to happen, it would need one unified collaborative effort to completely move away from the dollar. And as Vishal said, considering it's pegged to the oil price, I think it's quite hard to do that in practice. And again, I think for such a shift to happen, it would really need the agreement of a lot of the big nations. And it it may not be a short term thing. May be something that might happen in the long term, but I think it will be a slow journey to reach that. But I would definitely agree that now there are also countries which are putting less importance on the dollar. I think especially the big ones, the BRIC countries have realized they can trade independently. A lot of them which are now not, I mean, not really completely allied in America. It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that kind of thing, right? So you using that approach, and so I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this progresses as we go on.
Yeah, honestly, I think I agree with both points. To be honest, yeah, it's good.
Right, nice. So now, before we end this, I have actually one last final question for you guys. It's something I just thought of. If 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 there was no history of Trump as president, and Kamala Harris wasn't vice president. Let's say these were both the first time in office. Let's say it was 2016. It's Kamala Harris running for the Democrats for the first time, and Trump running for Republicans for the first time. Who do you think would win? Taking away all the history that both of them have had.
I would still say Trump.
Interesting.
I
Interesting.
agree with Vishal actually because generally I feel because of the party name, because Trump is representing the Republicans, I feel generally people are also quite tired of the Democrats. We saw that in the House of Parliament where the number of seats, majority has gone to the Republicans. It shows the general frustration with the Democrats.
I mean, I would actually disagree. I would actually go the opposite way because I feel a lot of this result was one based on Trump's reputation over the last, not even just from his first term, but over the last 4 years as well, the Joe Biden's term, and then also Kamala Harris's attachment in a way to Joe Biden, and somewhere it was always her campaign was always linked to him. So and I feel like if they both had a completely fresh, clean slate, my opinion would be that Kamala Harris would take it. But yeah, no, it's just interesting
But
to.
don't forget, Trump, like in 2016, that was the first time, right? He didn't have any history
Yes.
before that in terms of
Yeah, yeah,
politics,
yeah, yeah.
and he did win. People did choose him, like they did opt for him.
Yeah, who
So that
who was he
mentality
running
might.
against? Was it Biden? Who was he running
He was
against?
running
Mike
against
Pence,
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah,
Hillary Clinton. Okay.
And I think the reason why I would agree with Rishi is because I just feel like people were craving a change because that was the Obama administration, and
yeah,
I personally think they did well, but I think the politics, the results suggested otherwise. So I feel like it would have been a repeat of history, regardless of which candidate you put. If you've had one party in power for long enough, people will naturally like seek change, and we've seen that in the UK as well.
Yeah, agreed.
So I feel like that there's always going to be a bit of like back and forth between the major parties. Once one person's been in power for too long, people naturally seek change.
yeah. That's a fair
Yeah,
point.
the
That's a fair
the
point.
the UK political situation's a talk for another day. That's crazy.
Oh, yeah, that's
Uh,
that's a whole different ballgame.
that one will get a nice cup of tea for that conversation.
I think we can end this right here. I think this has been a very interesting conversation. I think obviously we have not gone super into detail on a lot of things. That this just touched the surface level. Do you guys have any last final thoughts before we end this?
Nothing for me other than to say I hope Sleepy Joe has a good final few months in office, and we just pray for world peace, and thank you very
Yeah.
much for having me on your podcast.
No, no. Thanks, Vishal, for coming on. I think you're the right person for this. I think you provided a lot of valuable insight into this topic.
Absolutely,
Yep,
yeah, thank
yep,
you.
yep, yep. Definitely welcome with your very interesting voice, I must say. We do
Yes,
appreciate your
yes.
insights. I'm sure all the listeners out there have also appreciated the insight and the discussion we've had. We have kept it, on like economics. We have not touched into other sensitive matters. We don't want to touch into those sensitive matters. I know there are definitely points of discussion, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. But as usual, people, subscribe, like. Raju will tell you the same thing. But if you want to engage or reach out to us, feel free to message, pop in, hi, and yeah,